when you want to make something believable, watch as his feet hit the ground here. The splashes. What's happening here is those are things that you don't really notice at first, but it's selling it to you. So
conceptually, like this hospital falling apart and him having to do like a mid-air save sounds like a cool idea on paper. Oh my god. Come on, guys.
I can't even oh, tell me when it's over. So the whole scene's premise from the beginning is good. It's a funny scene. So right there, the writing is well done. And I think that does a lot because it's all working together, right? He's a funny character. He's making this guy punch himself. So you're not focused on the CG.
But it doesn't work like that, it seems, you know?
Yeah.
They're like, well, what are you spending on the money?
Yeah.
I have to manage everything.
And it's like, stop it. You know, leave the artists to do their thing.
Yeah.
But
Let them cook. Welcome to Backseat Directing.
Where we talk about movies, TV shows, comics, and more.
We're your hosts,
Andrew.
and Aaron, with Dan today.
We put out new episodes every Monday and Thursday.
And on this episode, we're going to be talking with Dan and reacting to different CGI scenes.
3, 2, 1.
Action. So that's our theme song that you can't hear, but the audience, they can hear this theme song that plays after our intro. But Dan, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. You are a CGI artist that I've had the pleasure to meet and work and stuff. So tell me, like, how did you get involved in CGI?
oh my God. There were computers in my life when I was a kid. We always had a PC in the house. And then when I got to be around maybe in my teens, probably about 14, I ended up with a group of people who were a bunch of writers and weirdos. And I ended up getting artsy fartsy. And I remember like this little universe we had built together kind of got big enough that I wanted to show it visually, but I had no way of knowing how to. And then in 1999, The Phantom Menace came out, and it was, for good or bad, a CGI extravaganza. And as a result, I realized that, well, I know computers, and you can tell stories with computers. George Lucas kind of proved it. So I started downloading all the programs I could find. And back then, there wasn't a lot online that you could find on how to do stuff. I kind of watched the DVDs and watched listen to the audio commentaries and stuff on how the visual effects studios did it.
Wow.
On all those movies.
So what you're saying is Jar Jar Binks inspired you to work in
It
CGI.
was not so much Jar Jar Binks, we'll say that. But
Have you guys seen the videos of like people reacting to the movie right after coming out? And there's like this like quick cut of people like raving about the movie. Like, this is how what people thought about it when it first came out. Opening night, people are like, I'm going right back in to see it again. It's like midnight or whatever. Like, I'm going back in to see it again. I loved it. I think it's going to be they're like just as good, if not better than the original trilogy. And then it's like, as time went on, people like grew to hate them. It's so strange, like how that changed.
yeah, I don't know. It's one of those weird things. It's like the sequels of the original series, the 3 new Disney films. One of them has an insanely high rating, tomato meter rating on Rotten Tomatoes. On the audience side.
And then you only ever hear people talk badly.
Yeah.
I don't know who paid for that. I don't know. I'm like, but hey, to each their own. I guess everybody has whatever makes people happy.
But in terms of special effects, I mean, they've always been pushing the boundary. Like every Star Wars trilogy has been at the forefront of that. So that's cool that's what like brought you in the first place.
Yeah.
And then I got into it. My first, I guess, official client was in the late 2000s. I got hired on to make a little spaceship for some guy, and then ended up getting into it more full time. Bounced out of it for a little bit, took a hiatus, and went into the CAD design industry, and didn't like that. It's okay, but it's the creative aspect of it is what I missed the most, and so got back into it recently, maybe about a year and a half, 2 years ago, full time, and been doing it, going ever strong ever since.
It's an interesting job. I mean, you guys both like working full time in creative industries. It seems like it has like its stresses and headaches also, like any job, but it's got to be interesting to like do something in that arena, something that you're obviously passionate about.
Absolutely. I wish I could do more with CGI stuff because kind of like what you were saying, how you like have these stories or these ideas in your head and you just want to get them out there.
Yeah.
Sometimes those ideas are a little crazier than what you can do with just your friends and a camera, you know? Like,
That's what we talk about this a ton on the show. Is what we love about animation is it's so unchained. Like, there's so many stories that you just don't want like the reality pulling you down like to earth. Like, there's just no gravity with animation. You can just do whatever you dream in a sense. I mean, it's obviously not as easy as 1, 2, 3 and it's done, but like there's just so much room for things you could have never, like Transformers movies. What would those look like without the advent of like CGI and stuff like that?
It would probably look a lot like the 80s animated cartoon film. That's probably what it would look like. But
The old TMNT movies are like a load of fun, but like the guys in suits, just they don't move as cool as the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies.
doesn't hit as hard.
yeah, I agree.
What are some of your favorite movies?
Oh my goodness. I'm a huge sci-fi nerd. Star Trek, not the new stuff, the older stuff. The original crew, the number 6 probably.
Like the original Wrath of Khan.
That one, yes.
Not the Benedict Cumberbatch.
No. Benedict Cumberbatch, great guy, but I much prefer Ricardo Montalban, and that's the guy. He's the original Khan, and Star Wars, obviously. Love Lord of the Rings.
Sorry to interrupt you. What's your favorite Star Wars movie, though?
Rogue One. Believe it or not.
That is a really good answer. That's a really slept-on movie.
Yeah. We often say that that's the best looking Star Wars film.
Have you ever watched? So A New Hope, not to rag on A New Hope, beautiful movie, love it.
I'll rag on A New Hope.
That's what started it. You can't. It's The Godfather, But
so slow. It's a boring movie.
Yeah.
So have you ever watched it from
Staying awake the whole time?
Rogue One ended.
Oh, I see.
Have you watched the two together?
I have not.
Because it's the story that's connected to it.
We tried. A group of my friends and I mean, you didn't. We got 10 minutes in.
Yeah.
The pacing was so it was like going from, an interstate highway to a back road in the country. Like,
that's a good comparison.
It was like, oh, it's sudden. And it was sudden. Like, it was just like the pavement ended. And now you're, slow down, man. It was rough. And again, not to rag on A New Hope. That's what started it.
And Empire Strikes Back is like probably my favorite Star Wars movie.
Really?
Like, right after, it's probably Empire then Rogue One.
Okay.
Right there. Like I still put Rogue One up there because it's great. But like, I don't know. Empire makes up for all the storytelling issues that I think are in A New Hope. New Hope is like the exposition in order for them to create Empire Strikes Back. I feel like.
And it's so crazy how that haphazard happened. Like, that was never planned. It was George Lucas just desperately trying to make a movie. And under an incredible time crunch and under an insane budget restriction. And yet he was able to produce it and create ILM in the process, which basically revolutionized modern visual effects. Like,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's evident in the movie's like name change, like 20 name changes from the original draft of Star Wars to A New Hope, and then eventually becoming A New Hope Episode 6 or Episode 5. 4. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. That's the number that comes after 3.
But then you have Rogue One in there. That's like right in between, leading into that story.
You got Solo in there somewhere.
A Star Wars story.
Then you have the Clone Wars. And all that show, Rebel One.
Come so far since then.
Yeah.
But okay, so those are top tier movies. Star Trek, very much sci-fi guy then.
I'm a huge sci-fi guy, and that's what really got me into it in the first place, was watching those movies and wanting to do something similar. But I didn't have a model shop that could make 12-foot wide, starship models with lighting.
You should have said something. We have one out back.
Oh, that's nice.
The model work in Star Wars is insane, especially the first trilogy. It was so cool the way that they, like we were talking about before we started filming this, like sometimes your disadvantages and like a budget or something leads to cool creative decisions you wouldn't have otherwise made. And like these models probably save them a ton of money rather than trying to like make it look from nothing.
Yeah, the construction of those models, and I have yet to see them in real life. They go on exhibit every so often, and oh my god,
Are they in like the Smithsonian or? Like...
they I think so. The
cool.
Smithsonian has the original Enterprise from the original series on display. They light it up like every day at a certain time.
So cool.
But and I want to see that one too. I haven't seen that one yet. That's like iconic.
Yeah.
It's like the thing. And it's still going 50 years later. Like,
Well, I have to ask you this. If you're like science fiction a lot, what do you think about Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049?
Blade Runner's classic. You can't. I'm kind of conservative when it comes to where movies are. The older is the better, always. And what I grew up with is what I like.
That's a different perspective too, because like we grew up more with Blade Runner 2049. I mean, it's not like it came out when we were already adults, but like we're closer to 2049 than we are to the original Blade Runner. I think
makes sense. Yeah, I'm a huge Harrison Ford fan.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
such a
I just like geek out every time he's on screen. I'm like, oh, so yeah.
It's funny how he's like this. Like he seems like the coolest guy in school, but he became like the god of nerds, like being like Indiana Jones, Han Solo,
He's a carpenter for God's sake.
Yeah, it's like
He is Jesus.
like, and yet he became that, the savior of the film industry.
he's just so cool. Like I don't know. I see what they saw him for all these characters, but like he made it work. He's the man.
Yeah, I think his acting in that is just so good in all of the various edits they made of that movie. I think there's like 5 or 6 edits of the Blade Runner movie.
Blade Runner?
Yeah. I don't.
Blade Runner, theatrical cut, director's cut, like
And then the director came up with like 2 other cuts besides that because he keeps changing his vision of the film. I haven't seen all of them. It's like a long movie, but
yeah, I think that goes a little far when you've got like so many editions, extended editions. Yeah, Ridley Scott, I think, kind of went too far with the first Blade Runner with all the additional cuts. It's like you kind of got to pick one after a while.
Really a perfectionist. And he's not. I mean, no, he is the only director that's ever done that. George Lucas would never release a different edit. Never.
How do you handle something like that? Because I could do the same thing with my own work where I have maybe not a specific deadline or something, and it's just, I can make this part a little better, or like let me change some of this here or there. Or, like how do you know when to like stop? Because CGI, like it's endless. Like at least when I'm editing something, like there is kind of a limit of what I can do with the edit and the footage and the sound and stuff that I have. But when you're creating it, like how far do you go?
Well, there's that. Films. What did George Lucas say? Films are not released; they escape. And I think that really applies to any kind of artwork. Eventually, you have to release it, but nobody's art is good enough in their own eyes if they're a good artist, if they have integrity. I feel anyway. And for me, there's an added thing that visual effects is always improving. There's always new tools, so you can go back and redo everything from scratch and probably do it way better and way faster and way cheaper. But when, 10 years ago, what was possible is now easy, but it was just barely possible back then with the advances they have now. So when I think about it, I would say probably when I have no choice but to. I've invested so much time that there's so little there's so many diminishing returns now. You're at the point where what am I going to get out of this? And I think like I could get it to the point of being so perfectionist. Like back when I released my stupid little thing called Plagiaris. It's on YouTube, and it was just awful. I look back on it, and it's awful, but it got so many views. People really liked it.
Yeah.
But it literally, I was just like, whatever it takes to get this thing done is what I'm going to do. And I
Right.
just put it out there, mistakes and all, and it looks awful. There's so many mistakes. I can't watch it. It's the audio's bad, the video's bad,
Yeah.
the editing's bad, the music's bad, everything's bad. But it's just me doing all the voice acting. This was before you could even. One guy now can make a plethora of voices from just one performance. He can send it into AI, and it can change the voice to be a woman's voice or a kid's voice. Just you can record yourself doing it. I don't know if they've gotten to the point where they can change accents, but they're probably going to do that pretty soon too. So there's so many more tools now available to a filmmaker, amateur filmmaker, that would not available back then.
I think something that you said that definitely struck a chord with me, probably with Aaron too, and I imagine with a lot of people who feel like they would describe themselves as creatives, is the relationship between like an artist and perfectionism. And I feel like that's kind of in a way like how you would know you're an artist, in my opinion, is if whatever you put out, if you hate it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I feel like if you don't critique whatever you did, then you don't really care that much. It means you don't want to do it better the next time. So I think that you put it really smartly, and that's something that a lot of people would identify with. But you also touched on something I wanted to ask you about, which is the relationship now between AI and CGI. And is it changing anything that you do at your job, making things easier? Do you have reservations about it? How do you feel about it?
So obviously, of course, the first time I saw it, I was like, I'm replaced. I'm obsolete now. I gotta go bag groceries. I'm done. I'm like, oh, it's the end. And it was like I was ready to.
Dan Brown, grocery.
Paper or plastic.
You have to make a slight change to the
Yeah, it's like CGI is now. I don't know what it is. Anyway,
Dan Brown Moving Company.
company. Yeah, because my back is already bad enough. So I don't know, but
CGI's Can I Get Your Groceries?
yes. So I was very nervous about it, and all my friends were like, "Oh, this new AI, it's gonna be so easy. I can just put in a few buttons, make movie computer, and the computer just gonna go, yes, master." And really, it turned into, "I'm sorry, Dave," because it doesn't. It's limited. It doesn't have. If you look at them right now, they're kind of cringy and weird. It's got AI dream world that they got going on. AI does speed up the process in a lot of ways. When, for instance, like for an amateur like me who doesn't have a big budget, and I'm going on my own time to make something I want to make, I can't hire on a team of professional voice actors, for instance. So the next best thing is I do the performance the way I want, and then pump it through an AI to change the voice. So is it the best? Obviously not. Obviously, I would love to get, I don't know, Gary Oldman if I could, Wow. But
I mean, heck yeah.
Yeah, can you imagine having Gary Oldman be? But obviously not possible. But it would be the best you could get.
Gary Oldman watches the show. He might have just heard you.
But
You're looking for a new project.
yeah, right.
We got one for you.
It's a zero budget, by the way. But the thing is when you think about it, it's a tool like anything.
Yeah.
And I think like when purism gets involved and people say, well, practical effects are always going to be better than VFX, CGI. And they say things like, AI is the devil. It'll never. Well, it's just another tool to use. It does speed up the process a great deal. For backgrounds, for instance, you can take, well, I don't like that mountain. Scribble it out and tell it, put in a sky. And it puts in a sky and gives you options. It's going to be blurred out. It's going to be in the background so no one cares.
Yeah.
And if you're under a crunch, and you have no time, it's great. It's a great tool.
That's good to know. I feel like you said, as long as it's a tool, like tools are used by humans and used by professionals. So, I mean, I think there will still be like a heavy need in those areas. I think there was a lot of fear, like even we use AI to generate some of our thumbnails, or Aaron uses AI
At least like
to generate, not to
creating
generate
it to look how I want it
Yeah.
to, or like our poster for our short film over here. None of that. That's not a picture. It's all AI and layers of pictures and stuff.
Even
And
the focal blur?
Everything.
That's really good.
So there's just a bunch of different masks
All
and
yeah.
layers, and like I started with a little picture of the shovel from like probably here down, and then I just redid everything to make it look like Florida in the background. I added in other trees that I wanted in there and stuff like that. Like you said, it's a tool, and I use it a lot. Like even editing, like masking something.
Yeah.
Like now that there's AI masking, you can just kind of highlight, like you were saying, like the mountain or the tree or whatever.
Yeah.
It masks it out. Now I can color grade just that, or I can put text behind it, and it saves so much time.
But I think if you ask the layman to create what you've done with the poster, it would be very intimidating. So I think there's still a need for the professionals in the field. Like if you ask the average person on the street, here's the AI program, recreate that poster, they just wouldn't be able to do it.
Right.
So there's still the need for people to use the tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully that stays the course.
And someone with an eye.
Yeah.
That's a very good poster.
Well,
So yeah, but I'm not just saying that. It's really good. But
gosh.
you had an eye for it.
Right.
Which means just the computer spewing out stuff, and sometimes it's really crazy stuff that comes out.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously it would not be any good.
Right.
Or acceptable. So it takes like you said, an end user or somebody who's going to be there, the professional who knows what looks good.
Yeah, curating it, right?
Yeah.
With like an artistic eye. And we talked about this on the show before too, just wanting that artistic eye there, in the sense that like we want to see art made by humans. Like we want the artistic flourish of a human. We don't want these AI generated scripts that are produced and they're like,
Soulless.
do you want a cup of coffee? Like the AI is just not there to know how people really talk. And like you watch a movie with an incredible script like Social Network, and you're just like, well, they have like an element to it, and it's a human element that like draws you in. Like a script with a good soul, But I had another question I wanted to ask you, Dan. We talked about this briefly when Oppenheimer came out, about the difference between CGI and special effects, and there being limited CGI in the movie Oppenheimer. So what, in broad terms, can you tell us and the audience kind of what CGI is versus special effects? Like what are the two, and what's the difference?
So special effects is an older term in Hollywood. I guess they kind of go for visual effects now. Special effects would be like on set when they had an explosion or something like that. These were called special effects. Whereas, and they had model shops and stuff. But they kind of, over the years, VFX have kind of taken over that terminology. Now it's kind of more like visual effects. And when you have a visual effects artist, that can encompass anything, all the tools, from model shops to matte painters, anything that's a visual effect. Whereas CGI is computer generated imagery. So it's like Jar Jar Binks is CGI. Yeah. He is made in a computer and then animated in a computer, rendered using a computer program, and then he's composited later into the scene. That would be CGI. So CGI is a form of special effects or visual effects, but visual effects kind of is like an all-encompassing term, referencing or special effects, if you want to use the older term, but it's kind of the same.
Okay, so like Reservoir Dogs, they use fake blood. That's a visual effect. It's something.
Yeah, that's a good one. See, I would call that kind of a special effect. It's kind of weird how the terms kind of cross each other.
Then there's practical effects.
Yeah,
practical to visual.
Well, practical effects are part of a visual effect.
Okay.
So
subset.
Yeah, it's all of it's kind of like visual effects house would be ILM. Industrial Light and Magic produces visual effects. It's a visual effects studio. And so you have but they have multiple departments inside. They have a computer department, they have a model shop, they have an animatronic shop, they have a puppetry studio, you know, sort of thing. And
Puppetry.
Would you say like VFX is like something that's tangible that like you can touch, or and CGI is like all just computer, or they kind of blur?
They also VFX, practical effects would be something you can touch, like if you know Iron Man's mask or something. If they and they also made a CGI version of Iron Man's mask. So there were on-set versions, there were models that were built, and there was a CGI version of the entire suit. Practical effects are something you can touch. It exists in the real world. It's tangible. CGI is something that exists solely in a computer.
And then
Very cool.
And then there's like a blurb kind of in between those things. Okay.
Yeah, like visual effects or special effects would be an all-encompassing term to kind of like everything's in that package. So
Gotcha.
it depends on the tool. There are multiple tools that produce visual effects, but in the end, they're all just special effects. They're all just visual effects.
Okay.
Very cool.
Very interesting.
I feel like this is a good transition into a movie that did a lot of practical and digital effects, and they did so 30 years ago, and that's Jurassic Park. I literally watched this 3 days ago, and it looks so good. And for those of you listening, no, it wasn't my first time watching it 3 days ago.
not.
But yeah, it still looks so good today. Let me pull it up here, make sure that the audio isn't blasting at us.
Is this movie supposed to be good or?
Yeah, you haven't heard of it?
It's got some dinosaurs.
This is my favorite Steven Spielberg movie. I'm sure I've said that before.
Really? Oh,
It's in my top 10 movies of all time.
that is beautiful.
Every movie's in your top 10 movies all the time. So we can even start it over here. Let's move that out of the way. Oh, okay. Is that going to stay there the whole time?
My top 10 movies of all time.
I know, we're doing an episode on that here shortly. So this is a T-Rex scene
Yep.
where he's coming to attack the vehicles
Now I've said this
outside the exhibit.
I said this before, but I think it is just brilliant. Like not only the combination of special and practical effects in this scene, which is like the marquee scene of the movie in my eyes, where the big unveil of the main dinosaur in the movie, but the use of darkness and the use of rain to obscure any kind of imperfections that the viewer might catch, and then it just comes out perfect. You know, it's like they are so perfectly able to hide any area where they lack the ability to do something that you don't notice that there would have been anything they couldn't do. They might as well have had a giant T-Rex
T-Rex
walking around
there,
in the
yeah.
scene, the way they accomplished it. And just look the creativity of the angles, like not like that shot makes you feel the scale, but it's also super creative. It puts you in the car looking up at this beast. It makes you feel the height and size of the monster. It makes you feel the fear of the kids in the car, like, and all of that is due to like the effects team on this movie. Like
What kills me about this scene is the marrying of practical with CG. It's now you can tell the difference, but back then you couldn't when you were watching this for the first time.
You can tell the difference.
I would assume that shot in the car is practical, right? Because like the body of it's obscured, you see the face roaring.
Yeah.
That seems like they had a practical T-Rex head there.
Yeah,
Like
this is
Universal
practical.
Studios. Yeah.
And then there's a CG shot coming up. Anytime you see it full walking,
Yeah, I'd imagine when it broke through the gate.
practical.
And it's like you don't notice a difference between the two because of the way they cut it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of the movement of it.
Yeah,
You can
tells
tell that it's kind of
puppet.
animatronics, you know.
But it's cut. I feel like it's cut quick enough, and the angles are used in a way to hide that.
Yeah,
Unless you're really
totally
looking
agree.
for it.
They're editing around the imperfections, but
That's
that's CG. Yep.
But it looks so good for 30 years ago.
Also-
There's movies that are coming out today that don't look that good.
one thing we always praise practical effects for is the ability of the actors to actually physically interact with what they're supposed to be afraid of or responding to. Like these kids reacting to the animatronics is so cool to see. They also don't make child actors like this anymore.
No.
They just don't.
no. The ones that they terrified the kids probably in real life just to get them to scream that believably.
A Stanley Kubrick treatment.
Yeah, right. So there's this. You mentioned the rain, which is a big selling point. Not because necessarily it hides imperfections, but actually because it adds to the scene. When you want to make something believable, watch as his feet hit the ground here. The splashes. What's happening here is those are things that you don't really notice at first, but it's selling it to you subliminally, subconsciously. You're getting this scene sold to you. You believe it. So it's interacting with a real world.
You feel the weight of the T-Rex. You feel the speed of the T-Rex.
Yeah, the attention to detail is absolutely mind-boggling. Like when she points the flashlight in its eye and the pupil shrinks, it's literally like they have the environment, not like you said, the environment responding to the T-Rex and the T-Rex responding to the environment. It's like a two-way relationship that, like you said, subconsciously our mind picks up every day when we see humans. Like if you blew on some birthday candles and they didn't go out, it would be like, well, that's a glitch in the Matrix, or like the flame didn't move. But like like you said, they're marrying the relationship between environment and creature to actually sell it to us.
Yeah.
In 1993. My goodness, I love this movie to death.
Interesting fact about this entire sequence is ILM was transitioning at this time between the model shop and practical. So the Pixar computer had just been built around this time. And so the computer department was gaining momentum and traction. And Steven Spielberg and the producers were wondering, are we going to do it in practical with guys in suits, with animatronics? What are we going to do? So they built both. Both departments were working simultaneously on it. And interesting thing is they ended up kind of marrying the two. They showed a lot of practical in certain circumstances, and they did this a lot CG, but almost all the dinosaur scenes ended up being a lot of CG. And that was when the model department knew they were done. And it's really sad, actually, to see them recount the times. Several people quit ILM during this time because the computer department took over. They got the lion's share of the funding. But what they ended up doing was using the animatronic model as a motion capture for the movement of the 3D CGI. So there's still an element of reality here. There has to be. Because that's the biggest problem with CG is it floats. There's a lot of smooth curves, and computers like to pass things through each other, and they don't like things impacting. They like to just move things around. Oh, God. And so... and then...
Not there yet.
Okay, yeah, thank you. We haven't braced ourselves. We've prepared ourselves mentally and emotionally for that.
Man, that is unfortunate for like departments to go under like that. And then, I hope a lot of those people were able to kind of adapt and adjust and find a niche and like.
And these were geniuses. Like the model department and the animatronics and puppetry department in ILM back in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, like E.T., right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a puppet. Yoda was a puppet. Some of the most iconic characters we've ever seen.
Jabba the Hutt was originally a puppet. Operated like by 3 guys. Yeah. It's insane. And so, I mean, I think that really goes down to computers made it easier and faster. And that was really what sold them.
Cheaper, I'd imagine, too.
Cheaper.
Yeah. Maybe not like right away, but definitely eventually cheaper.
You can't make it. One of the biggest drawbacks to the practical T-Rex was making it run.
Yeah.
How do you make it run? Whereas CG, they did it. They could show it full body. And
how do you make it jump from the balcony
right
onto that swinging dinosaur bones,
You look at the first Alien movie. I mean, the xenomorph is a puppet, and it does not. To my eyes now, watching it as an adult, I didn't see it when it first came out. Didn't see it as a kid. So to my eyes now, it's like, man, it is hard to be afraid of this monster. The way it moves is so like unnatural and clunky.
Well, they had a skinny guy in it too. Like there was a guy inside the thing, and when you see it, you can tell. Like it's really obvious. I mean, again, I'm not going to contend with the purists who prefer practical over VFX over CGI. Practical VFX have their place, but CGI does too. And some people stamp their feet and get really mad when they go, "Well, practical's always better." Well, yeah, but try that. Yeah, this would have been a stop motion scene like the Rancor pit in Return of the Jedi.
Which is evidently different from the rest of the clips around it when you watch it.
Yeah, it's clearly different. And in this case, they were able to, without a lot of green screening, they just plopped that character into the two, dinosaurs into the scene in post. And it looks good.
And it's just crazy how well it holds up. Like the scene in particular in the kitchen, with the raptors chasing the kids, is one of the most iconic scenes in science fiction. It's one of the most iconic scenes of building suspense across movies, and they built that suspense with puppets for the most part. I mean, and then for, like you said, the wider shots of the raptors really moving. It's so cool. It's so fascinating. I mean, everything down to the breath of these animals, like the T-Rex's nostrils blow the hat off Alan Grant's head, or the breathing of the raptor in the kitchen scene as the kids are trying to hold their breath and be motionless. It's that movie has so much love poured into it from every department that worked on it, and it holds up in a way that just a spirit of adventure and fun in a movie, but still so thrilling.
I think a lot of it you just kind of hit on the head about what makes good visual effects is time. There's plenty of time. The artists have time to work on it. And also they really are engaged with the fidelity. They want it to succeed. And those guys at ILM were highly motivated on that movie to make a good movie. And so because of that, it stands up to this day.
They made history.
It's some of the earliest CGI in a film, and yet it's really good. To this day, it stands up. There was a guy on YouTube I watched who tried to improve it using modern, computers, and he could do it faster. He did it in a day, the same shot that would have taken months back in 1992, whenever they were making the thing. But the funny thing is it didn't look as good. I was like, but he did point out some things that I had never seen, because the scene is going by so fast. It's dark, it's darkly lit, so it's hard to see. But he pointed out a couple things. I'm like, oh, those are some mistakes. All right.
Yeah.
But it was limitations at the time. The technology was limited. The artist's vision really carried it through.
So kind of going back to what Andrew was talking about, how the dinosaurs are interacting with the people in the set, and how you're talking about the rain and feeling the weight of the dinosaurs. What goes into making all of that happen? How much planning is involved, between the CGI department and the directors and producers? And
the best, and in this case, that's why it ended up so good. The VFX house was involved from the beginning. Steven Spielberg, got the script and he wanted it a certain way. This is what I want. And the VFX guys were in the meetings. So there's obviously communication. This is what's possible. This is what's not possible. Working closely with the director and producers every step of the way. I think communication and cooperation are the biggest things between departments that make successful movies. Anyway, regardless of, even we're focusing on VFX, but that's any movie, as long as the teams are working together to produce it. That, and going into it, knowing what shots are going to be the big ones. The ones that are the iconic shot. We just saw it where the T-Rex was roaring and the flag was falling down. That iconic shot in the middle of the ruined, museum.
It's like time economy, right? It's am I going to be busting my ass on something that's going to be cut in 3 seconds, or am I going to do this marquee shot that is going to be the staple of the movie?
Right. So in that case, I would have definitely put your best artists on those shots. And again, the other thing is, you're working in a team. There are hundreds of people working on this, because one guy could never produce that kind of.
Right.
It's just impossible. So I think talented artists working together. It sounds kind of cliche, but that's the biggest thing is cooperation.
And I feel like that's hard. Like it's easy to say like, hey, if everyone just works together, we can make the best product. But I feel like that's not normally the case of how it ends up working out. You know, like
you hear all these horror stories that they're like they put a release date or something. Producers are like, oh, this movie needs to be out in the summer. This is a summer release, and they're like, okay, but you're giving it to us like in April, in May, like. You want to be ready for June? Like that's ludicrous.
It's impossible. Yeah.
And I think that they talk about, like you said, like the communication factor. Movies like Avatar. I think that James Cameron is making like weekly trips, if not more often, to the special effects team to make sure that the key really to most film success is going to be like a good director, somebody, because that person is like the person who sets the tone and decides the communication between everybody. You know, they might not be like able to make everything work by themselves. Of course they can't. But if they don't work, then it seems like everything else is going to have a hard time working.
Yeah. I feel like the director and the studio that's making the movie, you know.
Studio needs to just give the money.
Yeah.
And the director...
but it doesn't work like that, it seems, you know?
Yeah, they're like,
Well, what are you spending on the money? Micromanage everything.
and like, stop it. You know, leave the artists to do their thing.
Yeah.
But
Let them cook.
yeah, right?
You have to, once you like pick the artist, the director, the people in all these roles who you picked, you should have picked them because you trusted them, you know, not because you wanted to watch over them.
How does it work for a lot of your personal projects? You know, like client work and stuff. Like, are you typically involved from the beginning?
Try to be.
Or is
Like
it after the fact and people are like, hey, can you put this into this scene?
Yeah.
It's already all edited.
Like Aaron talks about how like, oh, that old classic joke, if you're editing something, like they want
do it in post.
they want to like change, or like they want to like change something, they want to change the song. It's like, all right, that changes literally the entire video. Probably, I imagine the same thing for you. They want to change something, it's gonna like ricochet.
Yeah, it's about, again, communicating clearly to the client. Hey, we could change this, but it's going to completely redo everything I'm done because this simulation took 3 days to bake, you know.
Which should change the price.
Yeah, it would change the price. When it comes to what you said about, I'm usually in post-production. I usually come in after. I like to be involved in the project from the beginning. Those are the most successful, is when you're involved from the start with the creative team. You're not just an add-on at the end. Hey, well, oh, by the way, we got to bring in the VFX artist. Well, find somebody. And then you get all this stuff that, well, why did you not shoot in front of a green screen? Oh, well, you can do that. You just roto around the guy, right?
Yeah.
Oh, my Lord. You know, like...
AI can do that now, right?
Right, yeah.
Is it very quickly apparent to you, whether you get something like in post or get early on, if it's going to be like, oh, they planned for me to do this well, or they didn't plan?
Yeah. It's usually like even in the initial meetings, it's gotten to the point where you can start figuring it out after it's not my first rodeo. And I'm like, oh, these people have no idea. Goody. Or I've been on a number of projects. Like I worked with Sean Kennedy, who made The Tiger in A Life of Pi. And yeah.
That's a resume.
Okay. Name drop.
Name drop. I know that guy's name. He brought me on this project, and the project was kind of weird, but working with him, that is a professional, a Hollywood professional. He knows what he's doing, and he's exceptionally good artist. He knows his stuff. And I remember working with him, and I was like, oh man, this guy is really good. Like he understood, I communicated, the communication was simple, easy. He was accommodating. He knew what was gonna cost what. That was a great project to work on. And I just was responsible for building a spaceship, and it was bank. It was a nice little budget, and I liked it. It was one of my earlier jobs.
That's probably a big factor too, is like the ignorance aspect. Like that's somebody who knows a lot, and other people who don't necessarily plan for you well probably are obviously not like malicious in their. It's like the ignorance of knowing
They just
how
don't
much work it
know,
will take
yeah.
for you to do something.
I feel like people see it on TV and movies, and they just assume since it looks so good that it's just easy.
Yeah.
People assume that about just editing or making videos in general, let alone creating something that's not real.
Right. Yeah.
I can imagine it's
again, going back to it, you know who you're talking to and they know what they're doing,
Yeah.
or they have no clue. And they're like, and usually those are the ones that I dread working for because they have no idea what things cost.
Right.
Like, well, you could do that for $100, right?
$100. Can't even turn them on my computer for
Right. That's the push on the button fee. No, that's horrible. But it's not quite.
They're like, I want you to make me a new Star Wars movie. I want you to make Star Wars 10.
Okay.
I have $100.
Oh, you're touching a nerve. You're touching a nerve. Okay, I have to say this. To anyone listening, you are not the next George Lucas. Please don't do that. Don't do that to your guy. Like, oh, I'll give you coverage. I'll promote you. Like, that doesn't work. You know,
Yeah.
George Lucas went to film school and he came in at the right time.
Yeah.
He was friends with Francis Ford Coppola and Steven Spielberg. They all came from the same generation of filmmakers that Hollywood was changing.
Yeah.
It was going from this dark, I call it the dark ages of Hollywood, the late 60s, early 70s, where just like the old houses were closing. And you have this new group of directors coming in and they just fell into it.
It was ready for their minds. And like, I was just watching Bryan Cranston talk about this, where like, he's like, you can be the most talented, the most well-prepared, the most hardworking, but the element that a lot of people don't talk about in creativity and show business is luck.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have all those things and not have luck and not go anywhere. So that's definitely a big aspect of it too. Francis Ford Coppola, I forgot to talk about this in our episode about upcoming projects. I think he has a movie coming out this year. It's been in the works for a very long time. I think over a decade.
Wow. Any idea what it's called?
Megalopolis.
Yeah, I've seen this.
Yeah, Adam Driver is supposed to star in it, and I think it's about like a modernized world where the Roman Empire never fell. So it's like,
Oh, that's cool.
everyone has like Caesar hair.
How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
At least 5 times a day before breakfast. Just every time I think about Gladiator, which is like once every couple days at least.
Yeah. Every time you see yourself in the mirror, think of Gladiator.
And I'm like, I am Maximus Decimus. I am Maximus Decimus Meridius. I love that. I love that quote.
To pivot back.
No,
Bring us
fine.
back
I
on
was going
track.
to start quoting, "Am I not merciful?" I'm not going to do that.
Father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I'll have my vengeance in this life or the next. That's one of the hardest movie quotes. Like, come on.
That is yeah.
So when a client is approaching you, what are some of the considerations that you try to let them know? Or like, let's say we're starting a new project, and it's, Dan, we want to have a scene with CGI and stuff. What do we need to do to make this be the best that it can be?
What's your budget? That's the number one. Number two would be, can you do it for less? Because 9 times out of 10, everyone wants every shot in the thing to have VFX. They want everything. And it's usually down to, you can either have a lot of crappy VFX shots or you can have one really good one. Which do you prefer?
Yeah.
And usually it turns into, let's just do one shot that's really good. Mm-hmm. Because especially for independent film budget, it's so small and it's not going to make it. As opposed to, if it's a bigger budget film, again, the same question. What is your VFX budget? And then how much time do we have? Because it's all about time and money. Really is what it comes down to. Like Jurassic Park, they had a lot of money. It's a big blockbuster, and it was one of the highest, it's one of the biggest budget films of its time. I don't even know what it would be today, inflation adjusted. It'd probably be a very expensive movie. But they had plenty of money and plenty of time, and they had a great team working on it. So that's what I would want to know is time, money, and who's the team.
What about the technical side of it? Like, how does lighting play? How does, like camera movement play? Like, how does all of that like factor into like what you can do or how much more complex it makes the shot or the composite or whatever. Like,
Oh man,
what are
there's
some
so
of the
many-
technical
oh my there's
considerations?
So many things. Is it indoors? Lighting, camera motion is the big one. If you have to match move a shot, live action with CGI, the slightest float is going to be instantly noticeable. People will see taken out like that, and then
And what do you mean by float?
it's when when you match move something. Like today, I was doing a shot of the Grand Canyon moving, and I was putting some text on it just as a test, and I was putting some buildings down, and they slid so slightly, but it immediately destroyed the effect. It looked obviously,
Yeah.
So they have to be static, and it has to look like the drone is flying over the buildings that are on the Grand Canyon.
Speaking of floats, do you feel like there's a phenomenon with CGI from viewers where our brains are trained to, when something looks good, to merely accept it rather than applaud it, and when something looks bad, our brain automatically
Oh, thank you.
criticizes it?
Oh, you've made my day. So, yeah, usually, and that is the thankless job of any VFX artist. When you've done your job right, no one notices.
We talk about that a lot with sound design, like a good Foley artist or something. Their job is like, you'll never know they were there.
It really is all about being subject to the story. And it really comes down to you're the unsung hero. If you did it right, if you did it wrong, you will be villain number one.
Not all heroes wear capes.
Yeah.
No capes.
But the thing is when another great animated film.
Agreed.
Oh my
I
goodness.
love the references.
Oh, that's so good. But it just, yeah, well, you can become a real villain real quickly. You don't want your name. You don't want your name to be known as a VFX artist.
Speaking of villains, we have some villainous scenes to queue up. Before we pull those up, I do want to say thank you to anyone who clicked on this video. We really appreciate you. It means a ton. It would mean a lot too if you have the time to follow us, to subscribe, and make sure you don't miss any of our awesome content. Hit that notification bell. We do put out multiple videos every week, Monday and Thursday. We put out episodes every single week, and we post on all of our social media platforms as well. It's a big mouthful. So
good.
Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, everything. We post daily on those. So make sure not to miss any of that stuff.
Yeah, make sure you hit that subscribe button so we can keep bringing on awesome guests like Dan.
While we're promoting too, we do need to remember to show Dan's page. I don't know if you showed
Oh
it
yeah.
already.
Here, let's get that up right now. So this is Dan's website. We got danbrowncgi.com.
For all of your CGI artistry needs.
Book him today.
Oh, man.
He's
Some of my dated stuff here.
we were talking about Dan's website and portfolio before the show and how when you're busy as a freelance contractor, like you don't have a lot of time to update and work on personal things like this.
But
so
being busy too is a good problem to have.
Right.
You know, as, in a sense. In a sense.
Yeah, half the stuff that you're looking at was just personal projects I didn't get paid for. So, yeah. Oh,
all right.
I thought we were talking about the villain. This is the villain.
This is the villain of the CGI world.
See, this is another thing where I will say, like, I can commend them for, like, I can commend them conceptually. Outside of the laughable nature that babies had to be falling out of the sky, conceptually, like this hospital falling apart and him having to do like a mid-air save sounds like a cool idea on paper. Oh my god! Come on, guys!
I can't even like. Oh, tell me when it's over.
We got to replay that.
Oh,
It's
Watch this baby right here, right in front of us. Jump.
it's almost like they were worried. You know how at the end of the movie it'd be like, no babies and animals were harmed. It's almost like they were worried. Like, we don't want them to think they're real babies. Let's make sure they don't look real.
So what's going on? I mean, first the story, right? Like putting the artists in this situation to begin with.
impossible not to make it look ridiculous. It's so over the
Oof.
top.
It's like goofy looking.
But there's a bunch of other slow motion scenes in other movies for a speedster that look really good. Like, why is this one not hold up to those other scenes, you know?
So this movie hit the hit the Reddit
Look,
so bad.
There's a bunch of knives flying at the baby, acid flying. It's just, it's comical. Like,
It's designed to be comical. I think they had to go that route to try and save it, like save the table.
yeah, I just feel like it's.
Why?
Look at his face. See, he doesn't. That's one of my issues with the movie. Is that a lot of times his head looks disconnected from his body. With
Kind of floating, like you were saying. Like
Yeah.
something shifts weird.
the jaw movement looks strange when you compare it with like there's no motion in the shoulders and the.
Oh, this is a lot of this is writer.
Yeah, I agree too. Right.
The
It's
whole
just-
concept, putting the baby in the microwave, that's an interesting solution.
It also probably doesn't help too that the entire scene
Is
not real.
it's not they? I mean, oh my goodness. This is painful. So this entire scene is just an example in the movie of
Look at that! Oh,
I think we need to pause this because I really want to hear what Dan has to say.
it's so
it keeps
distracting.
shocking
It's
him.
just shocking. I'd never have seen this movie. I couldn't watch it. So it was one of those things where, oh, will it corrupt me? I'll become worse than I am, and I'm trying to get better, not worse.
What I will say to you in defense of this movie is this is probably the lowest low of the movie. This is probably rock
I
bottom.
don't know the last scene from what I heard and saw.
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
the scenes where he's in like the time vortex.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
Visually, that might be maybe worse.
They ran out of time.
conceptually it's a little better than this though.
Right. Yeah. At least
The idea of it was
The
better.
idea of that is cool.
Yeah.
Like there's all these potential realities or what have
Right.
you. Around
So I feel bad for the artists who had to be on this film.
well, then their name goes on it when they had no time, and everyone's criticizing them.
Yeah, and this is what we were talking about earlier, the villain. If they had had a better chance, and in this case, this is the thing is, you know how many movies, DC and Marvel movies, are slated to be released in the next 5 years?
Too many.
Too many. There's a lot of them, and too many for multiple reasons. Another reason is that they're splitting. They factor in how much money they anticipate making on this. So they're counting on this movie making, pulling in profit maybe $250 million.
Minimum they were hope. Well, this movie in particular, I can tell you, is probably the most, in my mind, the most expensive movie ever made. And they won't say that because the budget I think is listed at $200 million. But this movie had 3 rounds of reshoots and was made over. It was planned over a series of like 12 years and made over a series of like maybe 8. So like how
He
did
was
you-
cast back in 2014 or something.
how did you get it done for 200 million when you also got Multiverse of Madness done for 200 million? It just doesn't line up. And they never want to release a number if they're going to make way less than that,
Yeah.
which they did. They made way less.
And that was the thing, was the production had problems from the beginning. Right there, it was a cursed movie from the beginning. But then you have the issue of they're superheroes. It's all VFX. Nobody runs that fast. And what are you going to do? Show like a slow motion, like the $6 million man, slow mo. It's so that will never laugh. That won't. Modern audiences will just laugh it off the screen, which they ended up doing anyway. But I think about those poor artists got stuck with that. And
Keep going.
you found some. Yeah. Nice. I forgot about this. Oh Lord. But so those poor artists got stuck with a scene, with a movie that they didn't have time, they didn't have money, and some of the shots were talked about that. Some of those shots they joked looked like they were done in a week, and actually they probably were done in a week.
Right.
Like, there's no way you can produce good VFX that way in anything, whether it's practical or CGI. And the CGI got the bad end of the short end of the stick because it's CGI. But in reality, any kind of effects would have been terrible in that kind of time crunch. There's just no way they could have produced So it was doomed really from the beginning when they had the budget shortfalls, they had the time crunch, they had the constant reshoots, and that puts back because you can't do the post while principal photography is still going on.
Mm-hmm.
So that pushes your deadline up and keeps crunching that time. And then you can't hire 10 million artists from around the world to work on one project. There's just no feasible way you can manage that many people.
Yeah.
But the criticism does tend to fall on CGI instead of falling on the director in the studio, who should have been working in tandem to make sure that this production was a lot smoother.
Yeah.
I feel like in that scene in particular, something that really kind of pulls it back as someone who doesn't work in CGI, but is that everything was just computer generated. Yeah. So there was nothing to ground any of the effects that were going on. Unlike this scene here that we're about to watch from Days of Future Past, which we've watched and reacted to this a number of times on the show already. But this is a good example of slow motion, speedster, but also some of it's real. Some like they mixed reality, practical effects with visual effects.
Like right now, I feel like he's really in the shot with a giant fan of some kind blowing on him, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like when you're watching this, Dan, what are you seeing that's done really well in this scene?
It is done really. So the whole scene's premise from the beginning is good. It's a funny scene. So right there, the writing is well done. And I think that does a lot because it's all working together, right? He's a funny character. He's making this guy punch himself. So you're not focused on the CG so much. There is a lot of CG going here.
Sure.
That knife is fake. The bullets obviously are fake. Everything hanging in the air is fake. The rain is fake. That's real. And then moving the bullets, obviously. I like that he waits till the last second to do that. And it's really hilarious. And then you're back to regular speed. It's just fantastic. But again, this is what I was getting at was everything from start to finish is a cohesive team effort. The VFX supervisor was on set. He might have even seen the script before even principal photography. So they were planning this shot, this whole sequence of shots from the beginning to make it work. That makes it much better. They had a nice budget. They had, and also they had good writing, as opposed to the idea of babies falling out of a crashing building.
Yeah.
This is a really funny scene.
What I'm hearing from you that I think sounds important is that in this scene, everything that is stationary is real, and then the things that are moving are fake. The rain, objects falling through the air, like the knives, the bullets, so that way, like, things that are moving, they can control because it's time relative to time, right, since they're moving and falling. And then things that are stationary, you just don't have to worry about them. They look real. Yeah. And it's just about making them look like they're in the same environment, which is less variables than like everything in the flash scene is moving. Yeah. Everything, the people, the babies, the debris in the sky. And then it's like, now everything's fake.
Yeah.
In Days of Future Past, there's a stage that's real.
Right.
Opposed to falling through the sky. In the Flash, everything was...
It was all just a CGI fest.
Yeah.
And at that point, you don't have any reality to ground it in.
Right.
Again, if you're going to make an animated film, make it animated. If you're going to make a live action film, don't replace an entire scene with CG.
I'm a big proponent of what you just said. It's like, why not make it animated? There seems to almost be like a... not stigmatism. I always do this.
I can't see.
There's a stigma around animation, but why? Make it animated if you want to do it that way. Animated movies are fantastic. Yeah. Some of the best movies ever made.
And The Flash would have been way better as an animated film because then that baby
scene, is. You got Flashpoint Paradox.
Yeah. Thank you. Actually, you're right. Yeah. But it shows you how much I follow the Marvel universes nowadays. But that scene, that baby scene, actually would have worked in an animated film because it's comical.
I could have seen
Right.
it working. Yeah.
Yeah, it would in that context. I could see it working. Whereas if you're making it into a live action film, it's supposed to be a live action film. People expect a little more seriousness out of it, and that scene came off as almost comedic in how over the top it really is. A nursery falling out of a skyscraper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you're just trying to think of the most crazy like thing you can think of to make people worry. Babies falling out of the sky. A little bit far.
Even just the realism of like the physics and stuff that was happening. You know, like in the Days of Future Past, he's running through the rain. It looks like the rain is reacting to him when he touches the knife or moves the bullet. Like it's reacting to him. But then in the Flash, when the baby was falling out, like just tipping over, the baby jumped from its back.
Yeah.
Like how that can't happen in real life, you know? So it kind of pulls you out of the scene even before you understand the like comedy aspect of like, this is weird.
And that is
It looks weird first.
It immediately takes you out because it enters what we call uncanny valley. And that is the worst thing for an artist to be in is that's why some of the best character animators are those who have like skills in dancing or sports. They understand kinesiology. They understand how the human body works. They understand physics. And it's a huge advantage for character animators to understand that. A lot of this hand animation you see is kind of going away. It's now motion capture suits, those weird like skin tight suits people wear that, you know, have the little dots on them and the weird thing on their face is how they get it now. And that at least lends weight to the character as it walks. But like going back to Jurassic Park, that T-Rex was the animation of him walking or running was actually done using the animatronic. They put little sensors on it. And they were able to. This is 1992, guys. They were able to do that. They're using
Blows my mind.
right. These guys came up with this.
This lends to like how impressive the movie was. You saying like that having a frame of reference helps because how much of a frame of reference do we have for how a T-Rex or a raptor moves? And they had to make us like believe that when they didn't have like there's no videos of a raptor hunting its prey. But also another cool anecdote related to what you said. We talked about this on our Blue-Eyed Samurai episode. Is that have you seen this animated show on Netflix?
No.
Oh,
It's a really cool show.
it's so good.
It takes place in like feudal Japan, and the art director for the show,
Jane Woo.
she took the whole like the whole crew of animators out and like had them do like a quick class on like martial arts and holding weapons and like
There's behind the scenes video of them like with the sword and stuff.
seeing how the clothes from the arrow moves, how the weapons move. Such like
It's like they can feel what they have to create, and I thought that was so cool.
Some of the stuff you saw, like you would see weird things in animation houses back in the day, and I think probably still today, where the animators would get up from their desk and they would actually act out the scene. They had mirrors that they would look at as they did the scene. There's a scene where in episode 2, the Attack of the Clones, where Yoda points. It's just his hand pointing. But the lady who was responsible for animating just that one shot of Yoda, you see her doing that pointing motion with her finger, and then she would do it again. And she's just completely in the zone.
That's cool.
And it's just it's a 2-second shot at most. And yet she spent that much time watching her own finger. She had it from different angles. She had a mirror on their desk. So that kind of real world stuff really does sell it more than, special shaders or subsurface scattering. We got to make the subsurface scattering better. You can get to that point where it looks physically real, but it floats.
It's emotions is
telling you.
I think that finding the team of animators on Finding Nemo like went on like a field trip together, and or maybe even like they went on a vacation and like went somewhere. I remember hearing a story just to watch the movement of fish, like to capture that in the movie.
Or even like James Cameron and all the research that he did for like Titanic, which I'm sure also led into being able to do Avatar Way of Water.
I think he went to Pandora and observed the Navi.
It was
for a
so
couple months.
expensive.
Yeah.
And what are the trips to Pandora nowadays?
Trip, yeah.
You got to go in the winter. No one goes there in the winter.
But reference is
Yeah.
very valuable for an artist, even like comic artists.
Yeah.
You know, like when I was making my comic or whatever, I would take pictures of the pose that I would want and then draw it out based off of that picture rather than just trying to come of it with my mind, you know? And I'd imagine that helps you as well.
Right.
In your tasks.
References are a big deal. Actually, that would be something I would ask. Like a client is, what you got for references? If I have to build something, you're staring at an infinite gray screen. What are you gonna put in it? It's an infinite world. And so having a frame of reference first, going back again full circle to AI, sometimes just typing in show me a spaceship with
They pick one that they want to look like.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's really cool.
Do you have any other clips that we want to look at?
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about environments and movements. This one is a clip on like just a character in general. And that's Davy
amazing
Jones.
to see. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Man, they made such a handsome man.
All right, let me make it full screen. Keeps jumping from me. There we go.
Everyone talks about, so what we're about to look at is from Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. And everyone talks about Davy Jones, but the whole crew really looks so good. I mean, his dad has a lot of practical on Will's dad.
Yeah. But what goes into making a character like this?
So much. One, you have to start with design. What are you going to look at? So you get concept artists to come in, and it's months of work as it is. And then the concept art is passed on to the VFX department, and they take this. And the performance has to be, they're using the live action performance of the actor on set. And they're figuring out what can we take from it and what we have to replace. Because there's obviously the real actor doesn't have the little tentacles and things.
You can see those motions like in his eyes and cheekbones and mouth that are lingering from the performance, right?
It is, and also his lips, his mouth, like they're exaggerating it, but they're following that, and his nose, his cheeks, his eyebrows are also his motion. Then they're either exaggerating it or adding on to it. So it's a team of people working on this, many layers. Like, it's a lot of work to make this work.
I've seen some behind the scenes stuff where how they were talking about like different animators would animate different one of his tentacles.
What?
Yeah.
So like
They'd have enough work.
Yeah,
for
they'd have a
one
person
Yeah.
edit like, all right, you edit the fifth tentacle from the right. And I think so they obviously work together, but they also let them kind of do their own thing with the tentacle. That's why it looks like they're all
Have a mind of their
individual.
own.
Yeah.
Because they literally do.
Right. Man, this movie looks so good. And the character of Davy Jones, again, is not there.
Yeah.
There's an actor there in a mocap suit, but that's it. Nothing's like practical like we were talking about.
There's so much emotion right there in the scene. It's perfect.
And then again, with these clips, you can tell you're not seeing a lot of Davy Jones outside of dark and rainy environments. And just rainy environments are also inherently dark because of the clouds. So I think that helps. One of the things I've heard is that light and water have a really hard time when it comes to like making them look real in a digital space. And I feel like probably darkness helps avoid some of that. Some of the way light scatters and reflects off of things, especially as angles change with motion, in really hard to mimic ways. From what I understand, and you definitely correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're it can be challenging. It depends a lot. Like, this is a daytime shot, and he's still slimy. The other thing I noticed with CG that helps a lot is when it's a totally alien thing. Now, if we had Orlando Bloom's face and we were trying to make Orlando Bloom a clone here, a CG clone, that wouldn't have worked. you would instantly have seen the difference. But because Davy Jones has such an alien-looking face that you don't really have much of a reference, what are you going to do? Go to the local, sushi shop?
Oh boy.
Yeah, right. You can't really see. I don't see that in real life.
Right.
They choose to go most practical a lot on some of these people who are half human, half fish, who are still in that process of transformation. I don't know necessarily. Maybe you guys can pick out what they're doing for the hammerhead shark gentleman, because his head he might be entirely motion capture. He looks really good, but he's basically fully transformed into a human hammerhead shark.
It looks to me like it's a combination of practical, it's a thing on his head. It's an appendage. It's not an appendage. That's what's it called when they did that in makeup.
Hat.
It's a hat. A makeup hat. A hammerhead makeup. No, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, why can't I think of it now? It's the Klingons wore it, the little ridges on their head. It was the...
There's a specific VFX term for this? Or
it's just a makeup term that they said it's I don't know. Anyway, an attachment.
Yeah.
We'll call it that, a makeup attachment. And that's what it looked like. That hammerhead was that, with some VFX elements added in post.
When I was looking up some research of this character, they did have a digital copy of all of those background characters and stuff. So.
That's impressive.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've never seen the behind the scenes of that.
I skimmed through it today, and they had a bunch of them on the screen. Well, I was looking to see if I could find like a good video that like showed like the before and after, but I couldn't find one that did it for this episode. But
interesting. That's so much work, and the fact that it still holds. That's not a new movie. It's an older movie. It's what, 10, 15 years old now.
Well, you know something I'd be curious to ask you about? Me and my fiance talk about this, and I think this is a general concept that people talk about, is that it seems like special effects, digital effects, that they kind of peaked like at this weird time, like 10 years ago. Like special effects are pretty much as good in a lot of movies as they are now. And it just seems like we've, in some sense, like they've gotten worse in areas where there's less preparation, maybe. And in some areas, like almost at best, they're just as good as they were. Like,
oh my God, that's a good.
Interstellar is from 2014. The movie looks fantastic. Pirates, like these, like Transformers. Those movies look great. They don't make movies necessarily that look better than that now, other than maybe the exception of like Avatar: Way of Water.
Boy, you bring up a good point. I haven't even thought of this, but yeah, some of it, I'd like to take the devil's advocate on, in the sense that everyone thinks that the special effects from their era, they remember it better than it actually is. Take the special effects from Empire Strikes Back. If you look at it now, they had to go back and clean up the matte lines around those AT-AT walkers because they couldn't show it at full opacity. They couldn't print it at full opacity. So in the original edit, it's a little rough. You can see the sky and the horizon line through the cockpit. They cleaned it up for the special edition because now they had After Effects and they had better roto ability and they could clean it up. But so are the special effects better or worse? I think it really comes down to there was always bad special effects and there was always good special effects. It depends on the movie and the budget and the time and the art house that was in it, and also cooperation. Again, all those things that we were talking about what makes good VFX. And yeah, those movies do stand up, but I look back on them and you can see subtle improvements in a lot of things. Like the shaders on the spaceship in Avatar: Way of Water are better than the shaders on the spaceship in Interstellar. I'm going to get a lot of hate for that one. But there are subtle improvements. It's tiny changes over time that they're improving on, refinements. But then again, there are some spaceship movies that have been released since Interstellar that don't look as good as Interstellar. I think it really comes down to there's good and bad VFX in every generation, and we all remember our generation's stuff as good, but we're informing it through that nostalgia thing, right? Oh, and that really goes back to anti-CGI people who are like, oh, it's always better in practicals. Yeah, well, you came from the era when they didn't have CGI, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I give you a lot of shit for your love for the Transformers movies, but my fiance was recently rewatching them, and dang, they do look phenomenal.
They look phenomenal.
Yeah.
Get out of here, Dan.
I'm sorry.
Good to see you. Thanks for being on the show.
Somebody on my team. Transformers plots are trash. But
hey, those plots are great. You run from those explosions. Just keep running.
Keep running. Keep looking pretty.
Yeah. I wonder if it's less of the issue of like, oh, the CGI is getting worse, but more of the issue of the greed and timelines that these franchises are being put under. Because like, a lot of the big movies that we're saying like don't look as good are part of franchises that did look a lot better when only one movie a year came out instead of 3.
You know, like Way of the Water gets worked on for like 13 years. So clearly it's going to have a little bit more of a advantage, leg up.
Right. So I'm sure a lot of in the newer movies, a lot of the technical aspects are probably better, but the execution of everything is a little murky because the artist didn't have enough time.
And that's really it. It's the same for practical as it is for CGI. The artists working on it and the cooperation of the various teams and how they work together. And if you get a good team, it doesn't matter what tools they're using. They're going to produce amazing visuals.
Right.
And it like you said, the sheer volume of these movies coming out now and the insatiable demand for more of these movies. I mean, I guess. I guess.
It's waning.
It's waning. There's too much. It's getting saturated. Yeah. Like the buffet is like endless. I'm like, can we get something new? You know, as opposed to 20,000 different Batman, you know, origin stories. Sorry.
Choose the character wisely.
Hey,
Dan, we started this episode out really good.
I'm with you on Nolan. Okay, I like Nolan, but. You know.
You haven't seen the other Batman. You can't hate on it yet.
I'm not hating on it.
All right.
I'm saying I like Nolan's.
Okay.
You probably come out still liking it best.
You could, yeah.
I have a right to that, right?
Yeah.
Not in Aaron's mind. Do we have any other clips you wanted to catch? How are we doing?
That was all that we had prepared for today, actually. Wow. But if there's any like sticking out to you guys that you really want to watch, we can definitely pull it on, or we can even save it for a future episode. I feel like this time's flying by. I really love the conversation around everything.
Really?
Talking about, yeah.
No, I'm having a good time with the conversation too. I don't want to drag anything out too long. I mean, we have other clips obviously that we could suggest, but we could also do another. Like you mentioned, we could do another episode at some point. Have you back as long as you'd like to.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, I'd like to respect your time and not keep you here too long.
Are you sick of me already?
You know? Well, you are starting to hate on some of my movies that I really like.
I don't say hate. I didn't know.
As long as you don't say anything about the body.
About the body?
I haven't seen the body. We are talking about the film here.
Yeah. I did have a thought, too, going back to, like, CGI and the franchises, you know, like The Creator. That wasn't a franchise, and that looked really good. Oh, yeah. And the director of that, I forget his name off the top of my head, but he was
Alex Garland.
Yes.
Yeah, he worked in special effects before becoming the director of this movie, and it paid off. You know, he made the movie on, I think it was $80 million or something silly like that. You know,
and before we got going, before we got on air, it was Rogue One we were talking about, and he's from ILM. The director got his director's chops. Like, he was going to quit. George Lucas goes, no, I'll put you through film school. So he went through film school, and he became a successful director and producer. And he started in ILM.
Yeah, and Ex Machina looks really great, too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that it's maybe not as flashy. I don't know if that's the right word, but maybe not as flashy as some of the other like big special effects in other movies. But just the AI, her like the shape of her head and her like the like robotic nature that they gave to her with the CGI, man,
It was really good.
it looks really great. And he's one of the great writer directors that we have going for us right now. So it's cool whenever you have somebody who is like a crossover with different like departments. They always do really well in that area. Like we love Chad Stahelski and David Lech, who gave us John Wick and now like a bunch of other great movies because they were stuntmen and stunt coordinators, and now they make badass action movies. So
Oh,
like,
you're right.
the crossover for Alex Garland from like the writing side to CGI side to directing, then his movies excel in that too. I think is his strength.
Yeah, you and I were talking about this on our phone call a few weeks ago, where it's good to know a little bit about everyone's job so you know how to work with everyone else on a project. You know, like you don't have to know how to do everything, but I think it's important for you to have some experience, you know, dipping your toes in to be able to work with them, to know what they need that from you to help them with their process.
Communication.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need to be able to speak the same language, at least somewhat. Like,
Right.
Like if I use, you know, some more technical terms for CGI, like ambient occlusion or, you know, texel density, and people are like, I have no idea what that means. It sounds cool. Like, but somebody who is in CGI and knows 3D modeling would know what I'm talking about. And so again, like one of my best working relationships with Seth Deming, we worked on that lawnmower thing, and we've done a number of projects together, but he is a kind of a amateur CGI artist too. He does use the same programs I use. So when he oftentimes will offer an idea that I hadn't even thought of, and usually it's simpler. Like I'm going down the rabbit hole trying to find the most complicated way to accomplish this, and he's just like, we're not making a feature film here, and besides, even feature films wouldn't go through this much work. Why not just fake it? And he's right. You just fake it, and it looks great.
Yeah.
So that's telling a lot of what you were saying. That if everybody knew a little bit about it, and that's why.
And then you can bounce ideas off each other too. It's like, hey Dan, I'm thinking of this in my head. What do you think? And then maybe you have a suggestion to kind of elevate it, and then we just can bounce ideas back and forth to create the best product.
Or to rein each other in. That's true. Other thing, because sometimes we can get too full of a head of steam and like, oh, it's got to be perfect. You know, that perfectionist thing where we go down and like we have, you know, 2 minutes before deadline and you're still rendering. What's going on? You know, like, rein them each other in. You're like, well, you know, let's draw back a little.
No one will see that shadow in the background of the background.
Yeah,
that's blurred. Yeah,
in the mirror.
No one will notice, you know, the stormtrooper hit his head on the door. No one will ever notice.
Well, Dan, thanks so much for coming on the show. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really cool to have like an expert on the show. You have a lot more knowledge about this stuff than Andrew and I do, so it's really cool to talk about what goes into making these different scenes possible. You know, and
you give us legitimacy.
Yeah.
I think you guys are legit.
We are, you know, the backseat critics.
That's right. Backseat directing.
Well,
we're in the back. You should do it like this.
That makes sense. Backseat directing. Okay, now I get it.
Clicks, right?
Ah.
And we got the logo in the rearview mirror of the car because we're in the back seat.
Hey.
I bet you there's a few listeners too that are just now getting that reference as well.
Awesome.
But yeah, so where can people find you? I know DanBrownCGI.com is your website.
Dan Brown CG Art is my Instagram. Daniel Brown's CGI is my YouTube.
Okay.
So yeah.
And then you teach some classes and stuff.
Yeah, that's Unreal, but that's just a thing. I don't do that publicly. Good
Okay.
Lord, I could never.
Sorry.
I don't edit that one. That one I would never be able to keep up. I can barely keep up with 6 students.
Sure.
As opposed to,
Sure.
so that one's closed. I don't take more.
There's a wait list, boy.
No, I don't know. That's a lot. That's my whole Monday. It's taken up just prepping.
Dan's business like grows exponentially
Oh,
of students wanting to learn.
Every subscriber.
Oh God, full sale calls up. No.
Yeah, this has been a blast. We appreciate you as well as anybody else who decided to tune in and listen or watch the show. Again, I will plead, I will beg, subscribe to our page, share us with friends and family. It's the best way for the show to grow. You can join in on our Discord. It's totally free. The link will be in the description to the episode. You can join in on the conversation.
We can get you on there.
You guys have a Discord?
Heck yeah, we do.
Yeah, we like to talk about movies, TV shows, comic books, and everything. But you'll also be able to make episode topic suggestions in there, and you'll be able to see the titles and topics for upcoming episodes before they come out as well.
We wanted to bring up the Discord while we were on air so we could like ambush you, like pressure you into
don't
like,
get
Dan,
into it, it's like-
you need to join this Discord.
Will you marry me on the Jumbotron?
You have to say yes. Oh my God.
Yeah, you don't have to join Dan, but you gotta.
Yeah, we put out new episodes every Monday and Thursday, post to all of our social media pages, which is pretty much everywhere. Check us out, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, all the places. We post new episodes every day. And
Every day?
I meant new clips because I was going on
Clips.
social media.
Gotcha. And you can check out our short film that comes out eventually.
Eventually.
TM.
But I think that's it now. So, and that's a wrap.